All right, good morning, everybody. It is Wednesday, the 21st day of January 2026. You're listening to Breaking Health Barriers with me, Dr. Jack Stockwell, for a couple of hours this morning. And I have plenty of good stuff for you, not the least of which is I'm going to talk about the latest stuff on the oil wars, fevers, because that's a question I keep getting asked all the time. When do we worry about a fever with a child? Essentially the same time you worry about a fever with an adult. What is too low of a cholesterol number? And flu shots, and try to drag in a few extra things as well as we get this program underway. So welcome to K-Talk, welcome to the stream. Scott, you always get upset with me if you're listening because I'm talking about the stream. You say there is no stream. I don't think you can get to the stream on a phone. I think you have to have a computer to do it. I might be wrong about that, but I think that's the case. You've got to have some computer platform, not on the phone. All right, so I want to get started with the idea of oil wars because it just never leaves the picture, except there are more and more people who are waking up to the dangers of bad oils. And I know I have more and more patients who mention it whenever, who've been listening to the radio show and understand that the food industry exists to make money. The food industry does not exist. Good morning, Wendell. The food industry does not exist to provide you with the best of Mother Nature's bounty by any means, because the best of Mother Nature's bounty is expensive. And food industries will not make money if they have to compete with other people who are putting out essentially something just a step or two above crap, which is the majority of our food supply. It's just like the medical industry. The medical industry does not exist to make people well. The medical industry exists to make money. And they're not going to make money if they get you well. The whole idea of medicine is to diagnose something, give it a name, and prescribe a drug. As long as you take the drug, maybe it works for you, maybe it doesn't. When you stop taking the drug, you're right back where you started, and usually worse. The energy industry does not exist to provide you with the cheapest forms of energy possible. They exist to make money. It's interesting how that works. The auto industry, the banking industry, they all exist to make money. And we are just so many numbers on the bottom line. And so you have to shop through this stuff carefully to navigate the environment where you are doing the things that are the best for your overall health, welfare, your financial, your political, your religious, your social orders, all the parts of life that make us human. It takes a compass. And to me, the compass is Mother Nature. And when you follow the laws of Mother Nature, things just seem to work out a lot better. Now, I think before I get into the oil wars, I want to talk about something that was in the paper the other day, in Epic Health, or Epoch. Some people call it Epoch. I don't know what it is. The article was titled, 12 Health Facts Doctors Want You to Stop Believing. And then the tagline is, even when certain ideas are scientifically debunked, it can take time for people's long-term views to catch up. Well, that applies medically as well. Even though certain ideas that are accepted as scientific dogma in the medical world are proven false over and over again, it takes about 40 or 50 years for modern medicine to catch up to modern medical research. And that's just the way it is. I know that because of the stories that my patients tell me that they hear from their doctors. And I always counsel them, well, I think you should go back and talk to them about this and suggest these ideas. And they say, well, it's too hard to get in there. Yeah, I understand. There is a shortage of doctors, believe it or not. There's a shortage of nurses because the medical profession just isn't what it used to be. It used to be people who wanted to become a doctor because they wanted to save the world. They wanted to end suffering. They wanted to be able to discover the cure for cancer or whatever else. So you get into the system and you see that the system isn't oriented that way. The system is oriented toward making money. I have 2 medical doctors that I take care of now, and they both tell me the same story. Both of them would not recommend the industry to their children. I noticed the same thing with law. I take care of some lawyers. They would not recommend their profession to their children, except one. There was one that did. I highly recommend my profession to my children. In fact, 3 of them adopted it. However, and I'm no sterling example, it's just that when you finally follow your dream and you get knee deep into it and then hip deep and then neck deep, it's not always necessarily what you thought it was going to be. And so there are these 12 things that are mentioned that are kind of the basic law of healthcare today. And this article brought out some very interesting information as to why that ain't necessarily so. And the number one thing, and I'll get into probably more in detail later on, is the idea of fevers. And it says fevers are bad and you should lower the body temperature. Well, for some people, especially new parents, if their child gets a fever, if they have not studied the subject, their first instinct, of course, is to grab an aspirin or Advil or something to try to lower the temperature, not realizing that that's a natural process of the human body. Your immune system works much more efficiently in a higher degree temperature of the body, which is one of the main reasons for fever. Your body will raise fever to kill the invader because a lot of bacteria are susceptible to higher temperatures and will die. But also it seriously activates the immune system. It turns parts of the immune system on that at regular body temperature, that part of the immune system is dormant for a good reason. You don't need an actively fighting immune system unless there's something there to fight. All too often, it's like this whole ICE thing that's going on in Minneapolis. You bring in more and more troops, and there's the 1,500 that may be coming from Alaska to Minneapolis, and you're headed for a great conflict that could easily get out of hand. Now, I'm not arguing one way or the other about ICE. That's not the issue. But I think you get the idea. The greater the power of enforcement, the greater the likelihood that something's going to happen. Well, the same thing with your immune system. Most of your immune system is rather dormant, just sitting around, sitting in your lymph nodes, waiting for the alarm. Now, it's a myth that a fever should always be lowered. The increase in body temperature, as I said, helps the immune system, but research has found that reducing a low to moderate fever may delay recovery. Allowing the fever to run its course is usually what's supposed to be done because your body isn't stupid. And the immune system and the regulatory system of the autonomic processes of a little baby's body isn't stupid either. It knows what it's doing. And so a low-grade fever, and by low-grade I mean under 103, is not a concern for anybody, really. It doesn't need medication unless there's lots and lots of discomfort. but a fever of 103 up to 105, or a fever in infants under 3, may require some medical care. You need to be careful with this kind of stuff because a baby's body's immune system is still developing, but it has the triggers to raise the temperature when it should. I have a patient who found a pediatrician for her children that she's happy with. They don't push shots. They let the parent decide what they want to do. But they told this patient of mine, who has brought her children into that pediatric clinic a number of times for a number of reasons, if the temperature is 103 or less, don't worry about it. In fact, the pediatrician said, I don't even consider them having a temperature until it's 103. Then let's find out what's going on. Usually a temperature around 101, the body's dealing with viruses. If it gets up to 103, it's dealing with bacteria. What did we used to do before even before aspirin? Aspirin's only been around a little over 100 years. Aspirin was the great miracle drug of the turn of the previous century. Aspirin is the reason why a lot of people succumbed to the Spanish flu, because they found out, the Germans found out, it was Bayer, in fact, that found out that using aspirin in a concentrated form would lower a temperature. And part of the Spanish flu was burning fever. And what they found out is that when they would give copious amounts of aspirin to these Spanish flu victims, they hemorrhaged like crazy. That's when they found out that aspirin is a blood thinner. And so a lot of the victims of the Spanish flu died from internal hemorrhaging because they gave them way too much aspirin, but aspirin has still been around ever since. The silly idea of taking an aspirin a day to thin your blood, just another silly idea. Plenty of medical research saying that's harmful, not the least of which it does to your stomach wall. But anyway, what they used to do for fevers is they would give children barley water, because barley water was full of calcium. And calcium lowers the the body temperature. So I've counseled many parents who, over the decades that we've talked about this, just have some calcium lactate laying around. If the temperature gets up to 103, put a little calcium lactate in water and stir it up really good and have them swallow it. Within 15 to 20 minutes, their fever is going to come way down, which is another reason for higher temperatures, is because the higher the temperature, the more your body will leach calcium out of your bone, because your body needs calcium to handle the fever. You're going to get that in medical school? I always, whenever I'm talking, and in fact, it's either today or tomorrow, this medical doctor I've started taking care of, I always run questions by him. Did you get this in med school? Did you get that in med school? Did they teach you this in med school? I'm not trying to be a jerk. I just want to know what their education covered. Because outside of diagnosing something, giving it a name so that it has a disease title and the appropriate drug for that disease, they don't learn a whole lot of other stuff. All right, taking antacids will fix your heartburn. I get heartburn now and then, but rarely. And I'll tell you, the thing that triggers my heartburn is eating too late and eating a starch with a protein, like pizza, like a hamburger. You got the starch of the bun, you got the protein of the meat. In the pizza, you got the crust, plus whatever protein's in the cheese and whatever meat you've got on it. And when these two things meet, proteins and starches, they hang around in the stomach for a long time. Because a lot of starches, especially like squash, fruits, really don't need to be chewed up. They don't need stomach digestion. They just need to be chewed up, turned into soup, swallowed, so it can pass through the stomach quickly and get into the intestines. Proteins, like animal meat, need to be broken down. That's why we have stomach acid. That's why you have pepsin that comes out of the stomach wall at a certain pH. Your body produces pepsin for one reason only, to bust up collagen. There's only one place you find collagen. It's animal meat. So we are designed to eat animal meat by Mother Nature, or she wouldn't have put pepsin in there. And so when you mix certain foods together that go through different digestive pathways, it's always going to hang around for the longest material to be digested. In other words, the potatoes with your roast is going to sit in the stomach waiting for that roast to break down enough to get into the small intestine, which usually takes 2 to 3 hours of slow churning with the stomach with hydrochloric acid and pepsin. Well, the potatoes are going through the same thing, and they're starting to ferment. And it produces a gas. And that's where the bloating and the indigestion comes from. And those gases and unnatural acids that are formed from this fermentation process starts blowing acid up your esophagus. And that's where the heartburn comes from. So people with acid reflux simply have too little stomach acid. So when I've counseled patients with this, and we all do almost at least one a week, you've got this indigestion because you don't have enough stomach acid. And the fact that you're taking omeprazole or, the purple pill or some of these other pills to stop your stomach from producing acid makes the problem even worse, because then you get all this undigested protein into the gut. Then you start having serious gut problems. So the answer is to take acid. What? And for people who do not study basic concepts of health relative to their body, regardless of what system that you're talking about, has to rely on somebody that satisfies their ignorance. And who better satisfies the ignorance of normal human physiology than somebody in a white coat with a stethoscope hanging around their neck? The hallmarks of the gods of healing. Now, that burning sensation is when the lower esophageal sphincter, which is a group of muscles near the esophagus, will relax, and that gas comes blowing up the esophagus. And it doesn't matter how much acid is in there, because it only takes a drop or two to cause a lot of burning. So, what you want to do is take a product called Zypan. Anytime I eat anything with protein in it, I'll take 1 or 2 Zypan tablets. They turn into hydrochloric acid. You don't chew them up. Make sure you swallow them. And all of a sudden, there's no gastric distress, there's no bloating, there's no indigestion. And before I know it, the hydrochloric acid has completely moved things through the stomach. Heartburn is a complex condition, and there's other kinds of symptoms that might be associated with it for more serious problems. But for the most part, if you're having indigestion, you take a couple of Zypan after the meal. Another old wives' tale that's listed in this article is avoid milk when you have a cold. Now, from my earliest memories of childhood, there were people telling me milk causes mucus. And you know how mucousy you can get, your sinuses, throat, whatever, when you have a bad head cold. And if you drink milk, it's going to produce more mucus to add to the problem that's already going on with your mucosal tissues throwing off mucus to clean themselves out, which is what they're doing. Most of the symptoms of cold is nothing more than a detox taking place where the body's cleansing itself of built-up toxic material lining the mucous membranes of the sinuses and the throat. And despite how long, this decades long, this notion has been, there is no evidence that milk increases mucus production. It says the research says it might make it thicker, but it doesn't produce more. Now, the important thing is the source of the milk. What is milk? Well, tiny little fat molecules and proteins and sugars and water. And when it's raw, it will do for you what it does for a calf. It makes that calf impervious to sickness and disease, strong bones, hardened muscles. I drink probably 2 to 3 glasses of raw milk a day. And I feel pretty good. And I highly recommend milk. I don't care your age. All right, another old wives' tale, taking an aspirin a day will prevent a heart attack. The 2019 American Heart Association guidelines and the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force recommendations no longer advise that healthy adults take aspirin every day to prevent a first heart attack or a stroke. 2019, almost 7 years ago. And yet it's still prescribed all the time, even though the American Heart Association says it's not necessary. So despite these new protocols, a survey in January found that 48% of American adults still think there's some benefit from a daily low-dose aspirin that they take in the morning with their morning supplements or coffee or bagel or whatever else. They don't forget to take their little baby aspirin. Aspirin is a blood thinner. Aspirin causes bleeding. And now they know some of the bleeding in the brain that occurs with accidents. In some people that have a higher level of aspirin intake can have a hemorrhagic stroke in the brain that would be debilitating, whereas somebody else that wasn't taking the aspirin would not suffer the same event. In this study, the survey, they found that 1 out of 5 people with no personal or family history of heart attack or stroke still was taking a daily aspirin. The benefits of taking aspirin, they claim, outweighs the risks. However, anyone thinking about a daily aspirin should simply research the subject. As I suggest with any other question you might have regarding the function of your body. Now, when you are taking medications and you have questions about how your body is functioning, you do need to include your prescribing physician in the decisions that you make. But what is amazing to me is the number of patients I've talked to who, after I've talked to them and told them, go back to your physician and tell them you don't want this, you want to try something else, and actually have the guts to address Mount Olympus, are surprised when the physician says, okay, let's try something else. A doctor who will tell you that might be the doctor you're looking for. The doctor who says, you take these drugs or I won't take care of you, is the wrong doctor. All right, number 5, doing sit-ups will flatten your stomach. There's a lot of advertisements claiming, and they're little shorts on the internet, little shorts at YouTube. This 5-minute miracle will flatten your stomach fast. And you see somebody doing sit-ups or crunches or some kind of midsection exercise, trying to get rid of that belly fat that's covering up that beautiful six-pack underneath. Fat loss and fat gain are controlled primarily by what you do at the dinner table. pure and simple. Now, exercising is important, but fat loss, you don't just lose fat in the belly. Fat loss is throughout the entire body. And exercising one part of the body is not going to reduce fat in that area. Now, I think sit-ups are good. I think I've pointed out a few core exercising or core strengthening exercises for some of my older patients. Not with the idea of reducing belly fat, but to strengthen their back muscles and their core muscles so they can stand up straight and walk around. Excuse me, I'm still recovering from this head cold from last week. Which is the first time I've had one in a long time. And the funny thing was, just a week before, I was bragging about how I never get sick. So exercise obviously will burn extra calories as opposed to sitting on the couch and eating your potato chips during your favorite movie stuff. But calories in, calories out isn't necessarily true anymore. Depends on what those calories are. But if you exceed more calories than you're burning, you're going to end up with fat. If you eat less calories, now this is not completely true, but it's pretty true. If you eat less calories than you're burning up, you're going to lose fat. But you're going to lose it everywhere, underneath your arms, on your belly, on your thighs, on your butt. And you're going to lose it gradually throughout the entire body. So if you've got weight on your thighs, you got weight in your butt, you got weight on your chest, weight in your arms, and you start doing sit-ups to get rid of belly fat, you're wasting your time. Now, the next one kind of goes along with that you need intense workouts to get real health benefits. What is the best exercise? I'm asked this all the time. Every week, somebody wants to know what the best exercise is. Walking. Oh, that's too easy. That's not real exercise. Well, I think there's a lot of people who die earlier than they should because they don't walk. Walking is an accessible form of exercise. It lowers the risk of heart disease and high blood pressure. It's part of a good weight management program, and it exercises the entire body, not just the muscles and the tendons and the ligaments. It exercises the joints. Walking has always been the foundation of human movement. You master walking, now how much do you have to do? Well, you can do 1 mile 3 or 4 days a week. Find a spot that's a half a mile away from your home or your office or whatever else. Walk to that point, walk back, and you walk a mile. You should be able to do that in 20 minutes. Or you can do 2 miles 3 times a week. You don't need to run 5 miles a day. Does running 5 miles a day hurt you? No. There are benefits to it. But an amazing thing that we've discovered in our clinic when we do heart tests and heart analysis is that the people who have the worst heart scans are the marathoners and the triathletes. We have this idea in our mind that the thinner we are, the healthier we are. And whatever we're doing to be thin and look thin, like the guys on the racing bicycles down in the southern end of Salt Lake County there on South Mountain or on Traverse Ridge during the spring, summer, fall months. You'll see a dozen or so guys on their bicycles in the same uniforms. It's their racing uniform. Not one of them, when you see these guys pedaling up the mountain at 25, 30 miles an hour, not one of them has what would be considered an extra drop of fat on their body. And you know what I mean. They're there in their spandex shorts and their spandex tops and their little helmets and their goggles. And they all look like they just stepped down from Mount Olympus. When we do a heart scan on these people, they don't want to believe the results. They think because they have low blood pressure and they have great resilient strength and they can pedal 30 miles an hour up a mountain, that they're the epitome of health. Their hearts are burning out, not because of the exercise, but because they're not getting critical heart nutrition. That's why. And when we get them on the supplements that feed and maintain and rebuild the heart, within 30, 60 days, they have beautiful heart scans. And they can feel the effect of it. Now, you don't have to be a bicycler. You don't have to be, in the top 50 of Lodija every September, the race from Logan up to Jackson. But anytime you do any kind of exercise, whether it's jogging, fast running, marathons, or just intense exercise involved with contact sports, and you're not taking care of critical organ nutrition. And when I look at nutritional or dietitians' recommendations for people who are involved in exercise programs, I'm looking for stuff that builds the heart. And more often than not, it's a very poor representation. What builds the heart? Come and get a heart scan test and I'll tell you. Next one, listen, that may have been rude. Heart builds the heart. Those who were the champions of medical industry 150 years ago knew if you're having serious liver problems, you eat liver. If you're having kidney problems, as the British were wont to do, you eat kidney. So they found a way to make kidney pie tasty. If you're having heart problems, you eat heart. If you have bone problems, you eat bone broth. Common sense that's been around for centuries, if not millennia. But when medicine took over through the Rockefeller and the Carnegie instigation 100 and some years ago, boy, it's almost, about 100 years ago, concepts of nutrition were thrown out the window. Now that's come full circle, because now Bobby Kennedy Jr. is telling medical schools, if you don't start teaching classes on nutrition, we're going to withhold medical school funding. And they think he's a beast for saying that. All right, gluten-free is a healthier diet. So avoiding foods that have gluten, which is a protein, which is a normal, healthy protein. It's in wheat, it's in barley, it's in rye, some other grains. Studies have shown that maybe 1/3 of Americans say they would prefer to reduce or avoid eating gluten because of the digestive upset that it gives them. And when I have a patient complain about this, saying it's so hard to go gluten-free, and I said, why are you gluten-free or want to be? I know the answer, but I want them to tell me. Well, I get bloating, I get diarrhea, I get stomach cramping. And I said, well, what are you eating that makes you think this? Well, invariably, it's going to be wheat, bread. I said, where's that bread coming from? What do you mean, where's the bread? Where are you getting the bread? Well, from the grocery store. Where's the grocery store getting this bread from? Bakeries. Where are the bakeries getting their raw products from? I said, do you suppose they're using wheat that's had glyphosate sprayed on them? Do you think that there may be some other kind of a problem besides gluten that's triggering this gastric distress? Because I love it when you look in the eyes of somebody that never thought about these things and you see the light turn on inside their head. I don't have to tell them anything more now. Now they're going to go home and consult Dr. Google and study this stuff and learn for themselves. Yeah, you've got to avoid gluten for a while until that super hyper sensitive condition in your gut has a chance to heal. And then thereafter, you want to make sure that your sources of wheat have not been sprayed with pesticides. That's the problem. Gluten is just triggering an underlying problem that's worse than the gluten. There was a study published in 2017 in the British Medical Journal, found that gluten-free foods are often higher in fat and lower in fiber and whole grains than their gluten-containing counterparts. And because it lacks whole grains, following a gluten-free diet actually may increase the risk of heart disease. And then additionally, there's research has shown that a lot of gluten-free products are highly processed. They have to be to get the gluten out of there. Now, they're not completely gluten-free, but mostly they are. The food labeling laws allow them to say gluten-free. And so a diet that follows highly processed foods is a much higher risk for heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and death from all causes. And you're going to hear that an awful lot more in health news. Death from all causes, all-cause mortality, especially when it comes to COVID vaccines. So if you want a really good gluten-free diet, make sure you're getting enough whole fruits, vegetables, beans, nuts, and there are gluten-free grains. All right, next one. Dark chocolate is always good for you. Dark chocolate, once considered a treat, suddenly it's a health food in 2022 because there was some research that said it might lower the risk of cardiovascular disease, certain cancers, and brain-related disorders such as Alzheimer's. The research found that the compound theobromine that's found in dark chocolate may even help slow biological aging. However, before you start filling up your grocery cart with chocolate bars, it's important to note that the type of dark chocolate you choose matters. Simply being dark doesn't mean the chocolate's healthy. Dark chocolate has cocoa in it, which is rich in phenolic compounds, including flavonoids. These things are what makes it healthier for the human metabolism. Chocolates with less cocoa have had the cocoa replaced with fat and sugar. And it's going to make it taste a lot better. It isn't as healthy as high cocoa chocolate, and usually will do more harm than good because of the contents, especially the sugar. The dark chocolate that seems to convey the best benefits to human physiology is 70% or higher. So what does that mean? The more bitter the chocolate, the better it is. Okay, next one. Running can damage your joints. Well, contrary to popular belief, research has found that recreational running does not increase the risk of arthritis. It builds strong leg muscles and joints, improves fitness, and even reduces the chance of developing arthritis. Why? Because it keeps the joints mobile. Arthritis, comes from two major causes. Overcooking your foods that destroys the amino acids that build joints, and joint inactivity. Now, as I said, I've taken care of marathoners, 5Kers, 10Kers, 5K walkers, mountain bikers, mountain hikers, and quite often, a lot of these people have healthier knees than those that are sitting at a computer all day of similar age. What actually causes this, as I said, is a lack of movement, obesity. Genes play a little bit, but not that much. Now, if you have existing joint damage or biomechanical issues, the running technique and the kind of footwear you wear is crucial. But for most people, the benefits of running, even a light, gentle jog, far outweighs any of the theoretical risks involved with it. Number 10, you have to stay awake after a concussion. The fear that brain injury could get worse is why a lot of people believe you shouldn't sleep or you should be awakened and checked after suffering a concussion. This advice has caused more harm than good, and it comes from old emergency protocols that modern concussion research has debunked. The old thinking was that unconsciousness meant worsening brain injury, so keeping people awake seemed logical, the thing you would do. However, when you prevent sleep interfering with the brain's natural healing mechanisms, there's a price to pay. Again, this comes under the title of what I'm always saying on subjects like this. Your body isn't stupid. It knows what it's doing when it raises blood pressure or lowers blood pressure. It knows what it's doing when you get exhausted to the point you can't move and you need to lay down. It knows what it's doing when there's some kind of a brain injury and it wants to relax and shut down as much cerebral activity as possible for the healing processes and healing synapses to take place. While sleep is safe after a concussion, if someone starts showing symptoms of complications, they start having seizures or double vision or a worsening headache, then you need to seek urgent medical attention in the emergency room. But short of that, I probably have maybe a half a dozen patients I'm taking care of now of various ages, both male and female, that have had a concussion, and they are responding well, really good. A couple of them came home from missions early because of concussions due to accidents in the mission field, and they desperately want to get back out. And they're just waiting for me to give them the okay to go, which will be coming up here really quickly because they're responding well to the treatment I've given them. But they definitely had a concussion. We don't wake them up if they want to go to sleep. All right, the next one, swelling after an injury should be treated. If you twist an ankle or injuries to joints, twist a knee, severely stretch the ACL or the PCL of the knee, and the ACL is usually the one that goes. And then the idea that you need immediate aggressive treatment. Leave the body alone for its own healing powers. It's just crazy. The kinds of things I see people doing as a result of their own ignorant but well-meaning attempts at emergency care for a sprained ankle or whatever else. And then they wonder why they're not getting any better. Swelling is a natural response to an injury. Mast cells are releasing histamine. Histamine causes blood vessels, the capillary beds, to open up so that plasma carrying vital nutritional materials can leak in and just flood the entire injured area with healing agents, nutrients, immune cells, growth factors to the injured area. I've had people who rolled their ankle, thinking of a 14-year-old girl a while ago, who during her backflips in floor exercise with gymnastics, twisted an ankle. And they had that thing wrapped up so tight that it was causing all kinds of extra pain that she didn't need. And I said, why did you do this? Well, to control the swelling. Why do you want to control the swelling? I know. It looks bad. And it's already starting to turn blue underneath the swell margin. That's blood. She tore ligaments. Blood's going to collect in there. And some of these people I know really well. They're almost like family, so I can joke with them. Other people, I know them a bit, but not as well. So I'm always trying to figure out how best to get them to understand. Leave it alone. Now, there's nothing wrong with what's called the RICE, R-I-C-E. Rest, ice, elevation, and a minimal amount of compression. Sometimes it gets so swollen that you're going to have some elasticity problems. So a light ACE bandage, not the type that restricts, the type that supports, is okay. And then just leave it alone. Elevate it so the fluids can drain out. Your body's still going to pump fluid in there because your body isn't stupid. It knows what it's trying to do. Drink a lot of broth, especially beef broth. Homemade beef broth is the best because it has the healing nutrients for joint injury. All right, the last one. Most chronic diseases are incurable. When you are diagnosed with a chronic disease, you are welcomed into the brotherhood of medical intervention and to be on some drugs. How long, Doc? Well, you'll be on these the rest of your life. Either hypothyroidism, and you're going to get levothyroxine, or type 2 diabetes, and you'd be given metformin, or some other autoimmune thing for which there will be drugs. How long, Doc? The rest of your life. Lifestyle change is the word I want you to remember. Your lifestyle brought you to the chronic disease. You change that lifestyle. Watch what happens with the chronic disease. Stop the processed foods. All of them. What's a processed food? If Mother Nature didn't make it, it's a processed food for the most part. There's some exceptions. Regular physical movement, managing stress, adequate sleep, social support, meeting with groups or in groups. That I just started taking care of this lady for what she believes is a chronic disease, fibromyalgia. Fibromyalgia will only be a chronic disease if you continue the lifestyle that created it. You bring the body back into a state of structural balance. Almost day by day, certainly week by week, the fibromyalgic pain goes away with no drugs. I could say that with about a dozen other kinds of things that are considered chronic diseases. So, someone with a chronic disease brings in their blood work, and we look at the labs, and I can see they're terribly low on vitamin D, or they're low in testosterone, or there's some imbalance for a woman in her the estrogen cycle with progesterone. And I point this out to them. I say, oh yeah, it's always like that. And I said, do you know why it's always like that? because you're walking a path that will make it always like that. What I'm going to suggest is you change the path you're on and walk a different path. And I have podcasts on almost all chronic disease problems at ForbiddenDoctor.com under education. And how a simple change in lifestyle behavior, probably a major change in dietary intake, can change a chronic disease you think you're going to suffer from the rest of your life to an annoyance that disappears and goes away by itself. I know for some people that's a hard thing to get across to, that they are usually the cause of their own problem. If you've raised teenagers, you know what I'm talking about. That's kind of funny. Change the road you're on, and you will change the destination and the outcome. And it's just not that hard to do if you can commit to this. A lot of times you need somebody to hold your hand at first, especially when it comes to learning more about physical movement, managing stress, these kinds of things. But there's this lady, as I mentioned, who has she thinks fibromyalgia. And I suggested to her, maybe you don't have fibromyalgia. Maybe what you have is a condition brought on by a chronic misalignment of the spine that causes these muscles to behave in such a way that they become sites of inflammation. And there are certain areas of the body that if you have pain here or pain there on a regular basis, then you have fibromyalgia. Fibrocytes building up in the muscle tissue. Is that correct? Yeah, there's fibrocytes, cells that lead to fibrous material building up in the muscle tissue where there shouldn't be any. But why? Why did that happen? Because your Leo is your ascendant constellation, or however they say it. No, it's your lifestyle that brought you to that point. And with a change of lifestyle, and you don't need me to tell you how to do that. I mean, I'm busy enough with people telling them how to do this stuff. You just go on the internet and start studying this stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of cranky, crazy stuff out there, but there's a lot of good stuff too. And so you're going to have to acquire a new vocabulary. You're going to have to get some medical terms into your head and study this stuff, and you'll find out that most of the latest research simply says a lot of these problems you created yourself with your lifestyle choices. Sedentary, weight gain, processed foods, poor sleep, sugar drinks, energy drinks. And if you start changing these things, your body will respond accordingly. Hardly anything I know of will change faster on this planet than the current conditions in your body if you change the conditions that created it. I think the human body is more capable of change than we have ever been led to believe, because I see it in the lives of my patients, especially those who have heart problems. And we're able to identify it on the heart sound recorder. Here it is. Your tricuspid is regurgitating. The tricuspid valve is not closing properly, and blood is leaking back up into the atrium, and you're not pumping enough deoxygenated blood into the lungs for oxygenation to come back into the left side of the heart to pump oxygenated blood to the body. Well, what do we do about it? Well, you're going to take these supplements and they're going to retest you in about 45 days. And you're going to see a much better tricuspid valve function. However, within 2 weeks, you will feel the change physically. All right. I want to tell you about Connie for a second. Connie's 86. She came in yesterday for the first time. Her daughter brought her in. Of course, I'm not going to give you the last name. Her daughter, I've taken care of for a long time. I've taken care of her sons. She brings in her mother, 86 years old. And she's walking with a cane, and she's bent way the heck off to the side, limping painfully with every step. And quite sassy. She still has her sass. That's anytime I see somebody that age, 86 years old, and still has their sass, I know we're going to have some good outcome with that person. Calling me by my first name, which I think is really cool. Well, we're equals. Why not call me by my first name? I don't need that DR stuff. And that's why my office doesn't look like a doctor's office. It looks more like somebody's home. Anyway, that's another story. So I take her history: bad headaches, neck pain, mid-back pain, shoulder pain, lower back pain, hip and knee pain. She's had 2 hip replacements and 2 knee replacements. And they couldn't see me, but inwardly I'm sitting there rubbing my hands together. Oh boy, I can't wait to get this one. So she decides she wants me to take care of her based on the outcome her daughter and grandchildren received. So I take x-rays. And I'm looking at one of the films. It's called a lateral. It's taken from the side. And I go, wow. And she says, what? What? You know, anytime a doctor looks at some image of you and they, oh, wow. I said, your mother having trouble with your birth? And she said, yes, as a matter of fact, I came out backwards. I said, you were breech. She said, how'd you know that? I said, it's right here in your x-ray. This dislocation that took place very early at birth at the top of your neck. I said, look at this. And I showed her a picture of what it's supposed to look like. And then I showed her a picture of what her neck looks like. She could see it. It was obvious to her what was going on. Well, can you fix this? I said, you bet I can. I need a couple of more films because I need to see what I'm trying to fix. You can't feel, Connie. What I'm trying to fix is on the surface of the bone, where the bones come together. And I can only see that on an x-ray. Can't feel it. The meat is too thick. So I get the rest of it. I come up with a vector, and I tell her the misalignment occurs on the right side of your neck, but it hurts on the left. That's the medical model. People who try to fix the pain by going where the pain is following the medical model. What I'm following here is the structural model. Pain can be anywhere. Almost all pain is referred pain anyway. Rarely is the pain caused by where you're feeling it. For example, the shoulders. Unless you've had a direct injury to the shoulder or you tore up the rotator cuff, almost all shoulder pain is coming out of compressed nerves in the neck that go to the shoulder. And so the nerves that sense pain in the shoulder are being triggered by a problem in the neck. And when that neck is fixed, the shoulder pain disappears almost immediately. So I explain a couple more things to her, and I try to be careful explaining this stuff because it is so new. They'll just get confused by what I'm trying to explain to them. But as we go along, after I've seen them 2 or 3 times, then they begin to understand structure underlies function. When the structure is off, the function is going to be off. And all the good, warm, yummy things you can do to try to alleviate the symptoms of bad structure is just that, a good idea. You're never going to fix the problem until the underlying structure is fixed. I try to compare that to somebody who does driveway repair when it starts cracking and sinking. You can pour in all the cement you want until you get underneath those concrete slabs and raise them up and support them underneath. will sealing the driveway make any sense? So I had her lay down on her side. Only one side will fix this. The other side would make it worse. When you're going to fix the spine, you only work one side. You work the side that's misaligned. Working the other side will just make the problem worse. And I didn't work on her 5 minutes. And I felt like, I got this. I got it. And I'm thinking, and then, of course, the little voice in the back of my head, can't be that easy, Jack. This correction can't be that easy. But I couldn't get anything more to move, so I had her stand up. She wasn't on her feet 5 seconds before she burst into tears, and her daughter's standing next to her. And your first thought, oh my gosh, I must have hurt her. She says, the pain's gone. I said, well, I want you to walk to the front door of the office and back. She was not flopping off to one side or another. She was standing up straight. She refused to use her cane. She walked over to the front door and back. And I said, do you feel taller? She said, yeah, I feel taller. Because you're standing straight. You didn't grow, but you are taller. You're a good inch to an inch and a half taller than when you walk in here. Because your spine just straightened up. And she just has this dreamy, faraway look in her eyes, like, what just happened? And I said, well, if I could have taken care of you at birth, the last 70 plus years of your life wouldn't have been filled with pain. But you, having been born, a decade before me, I wasn't able to do that for you. But you got it now. That's the power of addressing the spine in such a way as you fix the underlying condition instead of playing with it. She was just as happy as a kid on Christmas morning, as they say. And that's how quick the body can respond to being put back into a state of structural alignment, which is what my job is. But I have no idea what to do without film. I have to take x-rays because what I'm trying to fix, you simply cannot feel. You can't feel the bones anyway. You can't feel the atlas. I mean, it's covered with muscles. It's covered with ligaments and tendons. You can only see it on an x-ray. There are those who claim to be able to feel it. I seriously question that. There was a time 20-some years ago, I would have somebody palpate the neck there, tell me where the atlas is, and then go take a picture, which is exactly opposite from what they thought it was. Anyway, that's the fun I get out of work. And the only reason she came in was because I had cut my fees in half. And that special is still going on. If it had been the full fee, she would not have come in, and she would have gone to the grave suffering the way she was suffering when she walked in the office. But now she stood up straight, and she didn't want to use her cane anymore. And she wasn't wobbling back and forth, right and left as she took a step. And I said, Connie, this is just the beginning. It's going to take you a good year or two. You don't have to see me for 2 years. You're just going to take a good year or two of holding your correction, staying in alignment, and those joints will rebuild themselves. Now that the structural load on it has balanced out from side to side, instead of being way too heavy on one side. I said, imagine you're in a rowboat with 3 or 4 people, and everybody gets over to the left side of the boat. Well, that's what's been happening to your body. All the weight has shifted over to the left side of your body, and the boat's tipping. All I've done is even the weight in that boat. But you just hardly touched me. Yeah, well, that's the trick. If you know what to do and how to do it, and only through analysis of an x-ray can you determine that. It doesn't take that much pressure. No popping, no twisting, no stretching, no yanking, no twisting. Just a very small 1 to 2 ounce amount of pressure in the right direction, and things slip right back into place. All right. That's Connie. I think I have 2 more today, 2 more tomorrow, and 2 more Friday. So this will go on. As long as there's demand for it, I'll keep this going. You need to, but you have to make an appointment. And you're going to be there a good hour and a half to 2 hours. Follow-up visits are very brief because I hardly ever have to take additional film. Sometimes I do, but rarely. Follow-up visits, you're there 10, 15, 20 minutes and you're gone. But the initial, because there's x-rays before I work on you, there's x-rays after I work on you. And that's just to make sure I got it all. Sometimes I don't. I have to, regardless of the patient feeling, what they describe as 100% better. There'll still be maybe more in there I've got to fix. I won't know that without follow-up film. Why don't more people do this? I'm asked this all the time. Well, there's a lot easier ways to make money in chiropractic than what I do. A lot easier ways. I do what I do because I like the results I get. And this is typical. Connie's just typical. There's a fellow older than her. He's in his 90s, Edgar, coming in this afternoon for his second visit. His first visit was last week. Same thing. Work on him for a few minutes based on these x-rays to get rid of that lock at the top of their neck out of there so that the spine can straighten itself back up again. Rather than moving things, I am unjamming things. I'm unjamming a jammed spine at the top of the neck. And then it kind of has a way of straightening itself up right after that. All right. I'll tell you about Edgar later. Now, I want to talk about oils for a moment because there's more and more people waking up to this. I was talking to somebody the other day, and we were talking about fried chicken. I love fried chicken. I love fried chicken that's fried in lard. I love fried chicken that's fried in beef tallow. Well, you know what national fried chicken business just went to beef tallow? Popeyes. They got rid of the canola oil. And they went to beef tallow. Do you know beef tallow costs more than canola oil? I mentioned that to another patient, and they contacted Popeyes to make sure I was telling them the truth. And they almost seemed surprised. Not so much that I was telling the truth, but that Popeyes actually is frying their chicken now in beef tallow, a much healthier oil. Why? Because beef tallow can handle high temperatures. That's what mankind has been frying food in since the dawn of time. Lard, beef tallow, coconut oil. Because coconut oil can handle a high temperature. Why? Because coconut is the most saturated fat food on the planet. You know that? The white meat of a coconut has almost twice as much saturated fat in it than pig fat in bacon. For those of you just tuning in, I am at the last stages of a head cold, and it's kind of settled in my throat, but I feel great. I'm not infectious. So it's difficult today, 2026, to get really good information you can count on about what you should eat or avoid. And this is particularly true when it comes to essential fatty acids, which are derived from dietary oils and foods like meat, fish, eggs, and dairy, animal foods. Now, as I was taking my morning supplements, sitting on the couch, and I turn on the local news only long enough to get the weather report, And the rest of what's talked about is what the editors during the night put together in teleprompters, so I'm not interested in them. So I went to YouTube, because there's a lot of good stuff on YouTube. And right there in front of me, while I am contemplating talking to you about essential fatty acids, this little video pops up on purslane. That very, very common weed that grows up in the cracks of your driveway and in your garden, that you see as an impediment to a happy gardener's life. Purslane. It is a food staple for half the people on this planet. And it has more. Now, this is what they said in this video. I'm going to research it to be sure. But I don't have any reason to not believe him. It has more EFA of the essential fatty acid family than the flesh of deep ocean fish and anything else. And they showed somebody clipping the little green leaf. You know, it has a red stalk. It goes outward. I'm just thinking of all the purslane in my backyard that I have dug out and thrown into the trash heap. Not knowing this, and I only learned this morning. And they showed clipping the little green leaves off of this plant and throwing them in their salads. And then they showed various food dishes from various cultural groups around the planet who make sure that this is a staple of their diet. And on the island of Crete, you know, in Greece, they have the lowest rate of heart disease anywhere on the planet. And this is where some of the concepts of the Mediterranean diet come from, because they eat a lot of fresh vegetables and a lot of fresh fruits, very colored fruits, every color of the rainbow kind of vegetables, I mean. And then fish from the ocean, or lamb that has not had a needle in it and was allowed to graze. And purslane. It's in their salads. It's in their sauteed spinach and purslane dishes. It has 15 times more essential fatty acid in it than spinach does, healthy spinach. So I'm just telling this. You might want to look into this yourself. Excuse me. Because there's articles and books, and I see them on the internet all the time, that continue to be printed with one slant or another, recommending this kind of food or that kind of oil that you've got to have in your diet. And when you look behind the data, the so-called data that's deep in these manuscripts, you almost always find a financial motive. For a particular slant that's provided by this book. I think that'll be good for a while. So, for example, the data that's been put forth that flax oil causes blindness, prostate cancer, worse. I don't know, I might have to bring this show to an end because I can't go on coughing through the rest of this program. What time is it? 8:15. Much of the data that is in a particular book I'm thinking of that tells you about the evils of flax oil is promoted by a group whose main interest is selling coconut oil. And other data indicates that flax oil can only be used by the body in small percentages, and that you would need to have a half a cup to have any effect. that information is promoted by people who are selling fish oil. I'm sorry. I've got a full day of work today and I've got to have my voice with my patients. I thought I could last 2 hours. Monday and Tuesday, I could do a 1 hour show without any problems, but I might have to bring this show to an early end just to protect my voice the rest of the day, and to make sure that by next Monday I'm flying high. So I think I better do that before I end up being hoarse for 2 weeks. I really love you guys. And I love the K-Talk organization that allows me to do this on Wednesdays. I get a kick out of politics, and I get a kick out of my iconoclastic approach to the heroes of modern politics. It serves my ego. But it's the health show that I really get a kick out of, and being able to talk about people like Connie and Edgar. Bruce, thank you. Yes, purslane, purposely raised and sold in the marketplace for salads. The young plants are excellent fare. I give to people to get feedback on it. I sneak it into my wife's salads. Well, if Bruce says it's okay, it's okay. I will look for purslane in the grocery store next time I'm shopping for salad makings. All right, I'm now that I'm going to go, my voice sounds much better. I don't know, maybe I can go a little bit longer. But I think I'm going to bring it to an end. I really need to give my voice a rest. I hope this has been worthwhile for you. But I get a kick out of this, and I get a kick out of taking care of patients. I'm 75, still going strong, except for this head cold I had last week. And it's because of the copious amounts of Conjuplex that I took that got me over it so fast. Within about 48 hours from the time I was hit, I was back up on my feet and running around. Conjuplex, Calamo, Imuplex, just various products at forbiddendoctor.com. So I'm going to turn on the program at K-Talk that was there before. For those of you who have been listening on the stream, really appreciate the fact that you've been a part of the show. It's being recorded. Most of the people who watch me live on the stream watch later on in a recorded fashion. But we're a little bit short of 900, and I got to get to 1,000 before I can market this program on the internet. I need 1,000 subscribers. So those of you who are listed there on the stream right now, please like, subscribe, and share it. If you think this program has any value for anybody else, please be willing to share it so we can get those numbers up higher. So I can make some money off of it, and I don't have to work so hard. All right, guys, I'm going to end the stream now. I will see you all Monday with a world update.